The rain pounded relentlessly against the cracked windshield of Mark's old pickup truck, turning the world outside into a blurry haze of gray streets and flickering streetlights, as if the sky itself were weeping for the losses he carried in his heart every single day. It was one of those late autumn evenings in the small town of Willow Creek, where the chill seeped into your bones and reminded you of everything you'd ever let slip away, and Mark gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white, glancing in the rearview mirror at his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, who sat quietly in the back seat, her wide eyes staring out at the storm with a mixture of wonder and unspoken sadness. They were on their way home from another long day, him from his shift at the auto repair shop, her from the after-school program that felt more like a necessity than a choice, and as lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the deserted highway, Mark spotted a car pulled over on the shoulder, its hood popped open and a figure huddled under an umbrella, desperately trying to flag down help that wasn't coming. In that split second, as thunder roared like a warning, Mark felt the pull of his own buried grief, the memory of his wife's accident 2 years ago on a night just like this, but he couldn't ignore the stranger's plight. He pulled over, his heart racing, not knowing that this simple act of kindness would unravel the fragile threads of his isolated life and weave them into something unexpectedly beautiful. If you believe in the power of kindness and second chances, hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your own story of unexpected help, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that good things can come from the storm, and don't forget to subscribe to Moments of Love for more heartwarming tales that restore your faith in humanity. Mark's truck came to a halt with a gravelly crunch on the wet roadside, the wipers swishing back and forth in a rhythmic battle against the downpour, and he turned to Lily with a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his tired eyes, telling her to stay put while he checked on the stranded motorist. Stepping out into the relentless rain, his work boots splashing through puddles that reflected the stormy sky like shattered mirrors, Mark approached the woman whose car, a modest sedan with out-of-state plates, emitted faint wisps of smoke from under the hood, the acrid smell of overheated engine mixing with the earthy scent of wet asphalt. She was soaked despite her umbrella, her dark hair plastered to her face, and as she looked up at him with grateful yet wary eyes, Mark introduced himself quietly, offering his expertise as a mechanic without expecting anything in return, his voice steady even as the wind howled around them. Her name was Elena, a single mother herself, traveling through town after a messy divorce that had left her uprooted and searching for a fresh start in a place where no one knew her past mistakes, and as Mark tinkered with the loose battery cable that had caused the breakdown, his calloused hands moving with the precision born of years fixing what was broken in machines if not in people, they exchanged fragmented stories under the shelter of the open hood, him mentioning Lily waiting in the truck, her revealing she had a son about the same age back with her sister for the night. The rain began to ease as he tightened the last connection, the engine roaring back to life with a triumphant sputter, and Elena's face lit up with relief, her thanks spilling out in a rush of words that warmed Mark more than he cared to admit, for in that moment, amid the fading storm, he felt a flicker of connection he hadn't known since losing Sarah, his wife, whose absence had turned his days into a monotonous grind of survival. Back in the truck, as Mark wiped his hands on a rag and slid into the driver's seat, water dripping from his jacket onto the worn upholstery, Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned forward, her small hands clutching the back of his seat, her innocent curiosity bubbling over as she peered at Elena through the foggy window, where the woman was waving goodbye before driving off into the night. Mark started the engine, the heater blasting warm air that carried the faint scent of oil and rain, and as they pulled back onto the highway, Lily's voice broke the silence with a question that stopped his heart mid-beat. She looked up at him with those big, hopeful eyes that mirrored her mother's, and said in her soft, earnest tone, "Can she be my mommy?" The words hanging in the air like a fragile dream, pulling at the scars Mark thought had healed but only scabbed over. He swallowed hard, forcing a chuckle to mask the surge of emotion crashing through him, explaining gently that Elena was just a stranger they helped, not someone who could fill the void left by Sarah, but deep down, the question lingered, stirring memories of happier times when their family was whole, before the drunk driver on that fateful rainy night had stolen everything, leaving Mark to navigate parenthood alone, juggling bills, bedtime stories, and the quiet ache of loneliness that no amount of overtime could fix. The days that followed blurred into a routine shadowed by that encounter, with Mark burying himself in work at the shop, the clang of tools and hum of engines providing a distraction from the what-ifs that plagued his nights, where he'd lie awake staring at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, wondering if he'd ever feel alive again. Lily, with her boundless energy and unfiltered honesty, kept bringing up the nice lady from the rain, drawing pictures of a family with 3 stick figures instead of 2, her crayons scratching across paper in vibrant strokes that depicted smiles and holding hands, and Mark would nod, tucking her in with stories of adventure to steer her mind away from the impossible. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A week later, as Mark picked up Lily from school, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her hair in uneven pigtails he'd attempted that morning, he spotted Elena at the local diner across the street, her car parked outside, the very one he'd fixed, and on impulse, or perhaps desperation for something more than his solitary existence, he crossed the road with Lily in tow, the bell above the door jingling like a herald of change. Elena looked up from her coffee, surprise melting into a warm smile, and as they joined her at the booth, the conversation flowed easily, revealing shared pains, her ex-husband's betrayal mirroring Mark's loss in its isolating cruelty, and Lily, sensing the spark, chattered away about her favorite dolls and school projects, her laughter filling the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. As weeks turned into months, their chance meeting evolved into tentative coffee dates and park outings, where the autumn leaves gave way to winter's crisp blanket of snow, blanketing Willow Creek in a hush that amplified every whispered confession and shared glance. Mark struggled with the guilt that clawed at him, feeling like he was betraying Sarah's memory by allowing Elena into their lives, his mornings starting with a ritual visit to the cemetery where he'd stand before her gravestone, the cold wind whipping at his coat as he murmured apologies for moving on, yet Lily's growing attachment pulled him forward, her bedtime pleas for Elena to read her stories tugging at his resolve. Elena, too, faced her own demons, the scars from her divorce making her hesitant to trust, her nights filled with doubts about uprooting her son, Alex, to this quiet town, but the way Mark looked at her, with quiet strength and unspoken understanding, chipped away at her walls, their walks along the frozen riverbank becoming moments of vulnerability, where they'd share dreams deferred and fears unspoken, the steam from their breaths mingling in the frosty air. Suspense built in the small tensions, a missed call that sparked insecurity, a family gathering where old friends questioned Mark's readiness, and Lily's innocent questions that forced them to confront the pace of their budding relationship, each step forward laced with the risk of heartbreak. Spring arrived like a promise renewed, the town blooming with flowers that dotted the parks and sidewalks, mirroring the tentative hope sprouting in Mark's heart as he watched Elena and Lily bond over baking cookies in their cluttered kitchen, flour dusting their noses and laughter echoing off the walls that had once felt so empty. The challenges persisted, Mark's long hours at the shop clashing with Elena's job search, leading to exhausted arguments whispered in the dim light of evening, where exhaustion threatened to unravel their fragile connection, but they navigated them with a growing resilience, Elena's gentle encouragement helping Mark open up about his grief, her own stories of resilience inspiring him to envision a future beyond survival. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of orange and pink, painting the sky in hues that reminded Mark of Sarah's favorite sunsets, he took Elena's hand during a quiet picnic with the kids, Alex and Lily chasing fireflies in the grass, and confessed his fears, the words tumbling out like a dam breaking, admitting how Lily's simple question had ignited a spark he was terrified to fan into flame. Elena's response, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, was a quiet affirmation of her own feelings, and in that moment, as the children ran back with jars glowing with captured light, the family they were becoming felt real, the suspense of uncertainty giving way to the steady build of trust and love. By summer's warmth, their lives had intertwined seamlessly, with shared barbecues and weekend trips to the lake, where the water lapped gently at the shore and the air hummed with the sounds of children's play, Mark finding joy in the chaos of a blended family that healed the fractures in his soul. The climax came during a town festival, fireworks bursting overhead in cascades of color, as Lily tugged at Elena's sleeve amid the crowd, her voice rising above the cheers to ask again, with all the earnestness of her young heart, if Elena could be her mommy now, the question no longer a whimsical dream but a poignant plea that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Mark, kneeling down to her level, explained with a voice thick with emotion that families weren't just born but built, and as Elena nodded, pulling them all into an embrace under the exploding sky, the emotional weight of their journey crested, leaving them transformed, stronger, more whole, inspired by the kindness that had started it all. If this story has touched your heart and reminded you of the beauty in unexpected connections, please like, comment, and subscribe to Moments of Love. Your engagement means the world and helps share more tales like this. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to comment below with the line, "Kindness changes everything," if you've ever experienced a moment where a small act led to something profound.